Imagine for a second someone hands you a list of rules.
Okay.
And I don't mean like a top 10 list. I
Yeah.
mean a really, really strict, comprehensive, just exhaustive list.
Mm-hmm.
And you spend your entire life, every single minute, trying to check every box. You're terrified that if you miss one tiny detail, the whole thing just falls apart.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You're stressed, you're failing. But what if I told you the list wasn't actually given to you so that you could complete it? What if it was given to you specifically to prove that you couldn't?
That's a bit of a head scratcher to start the day. It sounds like a setup for failure, doesn't it?
It does, but according to the stack of sources we're looking at today,
Mhm.
that setup is, it's actually the first step toward the solution.
Ah.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are wading into some truly deep theological waters. We've been reading through sermons, books, specifically one called Have You Truly Been Born Again of Water and the Spirit, and testimonies from the ministry of Reverend Paul C. Jong.
And this is a fascinating collection. It doesn't just tweak standard Christian theology. It fundamentally challenges the whole mechanism of salvation that most believers just take for granted.
Right.
The central argument here is that most people are missing a crucial half of the gospel.
Exactly. If you ask the average person, what's the gospel? They'll almost always point to the cross. The blood. Jesus died for my sins.
End of story.
End of story. But these sources argue that if you have the blood without the water, you actually have an incomplete gospel. And they say that's why so many people still feel this burden of guilt, even after they believe.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is to really unpack that. We need to figure out what this water part is, the baptism of Jesus, and how it connects to the Old Testament.
And how it all leads to this claim that it's the difference between seeing yourself as a sinner or as righteous.
That's a big claim.
It is. And just a heads up, this requires a bit of a mental reset. We have to look at these texts on their own terms. And the first term we have to redefine is the problem itself, sin.
Yeah, not in the way we usually think about it.
No. Usually we think of sin as, doing bad things. I lied, I got angry in traffic.
Action.
Right. But the source looks at the Greek, hamartia, which means missing the mark. But it goes even further. Reverend John describes humans not as people who sin, but as, what was it?
Lumps of sin.
Lumps of sin. It's such a visceral image. It sounds harsh, but he uses this analogy of an apple tree that, I have to admit, it just clicked for me.
It's a powerful one.
Well, think about it. An apple tree doesn't produce apples because it, decides to.
Right. It doesn't wake up and say, today I'm going to try really hard to be an apple tree.
It produces apples because that's its nature.
Mm.
It can't produce oranges no matter how hard it tries.
And that's the argument for humans. As
Yeah.
descendants of Adam, we don't just commit sins, we have a sinful nature. We are factories that produce sin.
Which brings us back to that list of rules from the beginning. The law. The source points out there are 613 articles of the law in the Old Testament, and I think most people see those laws as a kind of ladder. If I can just keep enough of these rules, I'll climb my way to God.
That is the common perception. But Reverend Zhang argues the law was never, ever designed to be a ladder.
It was designed to be a mirror.
Exactly. A mirror. I love that distinction.
Because a mirror doesn't wash your face, it just shows you the dirt.
Precisely. The source quotes Romans 3:20 a lot. By the law is the knowledge of sin. The point of all those rules wasn't to save you.
It was to prove you needed saving. To show you that you're an apple tree. It reveals that even if you don't physically act out, the hatred or the lust in your heart is already a violation.
Right. And that's why the text is so scathing toward what it calls the Pharisee mindset. This idea of just polishing the outside of the apple while the core is rotten.
You just end up becoming a hypocrite. Pretending to be holy, but your internal factory is still churning out sin.
Because you can't change your nature by trimming the branches. So we're stuck. We are these lumps of sin. And this is where the source pivots to the Old Testament.
Right. God knew we couldn't keep the law, so he established a system to deal with the failure.
And we have to go back to Leviticus.
Yes. Honestly, reading through the details of the Day of Atonement, it was a real eye-opener on the mechanics of this whole theology.
It's the absolute foundation of the argument. You can't get the gospel of water and the Spirit without Leviticus 16.
Okay, so let's set the scene. In the Old Testament, if you sinned, you couldn't just say, sorry, God.
Not enough. There had to be a death, a payment.
So you'd bring an animal, a lamb, a goat, to the tabernacle. But
Well,
and this is the part the source just hammers home again and again.
yeah.
You couldn't just kill it.
No, that's not a sacrifice. That's just butchery.
Right.
The critical moment, the absolute legal requirement, was the laying on of hands.
This is what I want to focus on. The text treats this like a legal transaction. It's not just a symbolic touch.
No, it's like signing over a deed. The source describes it as the literal, actual transfer of your sin from you, the sinner, onto the offering.
So the sin physically
Yeah.
moves.
It moves, it leaves the human and enters the animal. Now the animal is carrying your sin.
So if you skip that step,
Yeah.
if you don't lay on the hands,
The sacrifice is invalid, it's worthless. The animal is dying for nothing because it's not carrying your guilt. It has to die in your place.
and this happened on a national scale too, right? On the Day of Atonement, the high priest, Aaron.
Right. He would lay his hands on the scapegoat, but he wasn't just acting for himself. He was the representative for the whole nation of Israel.
So a whole year's worth of the nation's sin.
All of it. Transferred to that one goat, and then they sent it away into the wilderness to die. The visual is so clear. The sin is gone.
Okay, so there's the blueprint. Step 1, a transfer mechanism, the laying on of hands. Step 2, a judgment, which is death.
Exactly.
Now, here's where the source drops the aha moment.
Yeah.
It claims that almost all of modern Christianity's forgotten the first half of this blueprint when it comes to Jesus.
This is the core thesis. Jesus is the reality that the Old Testament shadow is pointing to. But for him to be the true Lamb of God,
The sin has to be legally transferred to him first.
it has to be. He can't just die for us. He has to die as us, carrying our burden.
And this is where the water comes in, the baptism. I admit, before reading this, I always just thought of Jesus' baptism as, well, ceremonial.
Or him setting an example.
Yeah. But Reverend Jong argues it was the New Testament equivalent of the laying on of hands.
It completely changes that whole scene at the Jordan River, doesn't it? When John the Baptist puts his hands on Jesus, it's not just a prophet blessing a Messiah.
We have to look at who John is.
Yes. The source spends a lot of time on his lineage. He's born of Zacharias and Elizabeth, both from the priestly line of Aaron.
So he has the legal authority.
He is the last high priest of the Old Testament era, the representative of all humankind. So when Jesus comes to him, he says something really specific in Matthew 3:15. Permit it to be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness.
Fulfill all righteousness. I've read that 1,000 times. I just thought it meant, let's do the right thing.
But the source reads it as legal jargon. In this context, righteousness is the fair and just fulfillment of the law. God can't just wave a hand and say, you're forgiven. The debt has to be moved.
So when John lays his hands on Jesus in the water,
He's doing exactly what Aaron did to the goat. He's transferring the sin of the world past, present, and future onto Jesus.
that is a massive claim. So the argument is, the moment Jesus came up out of that water, he was effectively sin walking on two legs. He was carrying everything.
Yes, that is the gospel of water and the Spirit. The water is the baptism, the transfer. The source says if you only believe in the cross, the blood, without understanding the baptism, you're trusting in a sacrifice that wasn't actually carrying your sins.
It's like offering the lamb without laying your hands on it.
It's an incomplete offering. The source compares it to Cain and Abel. Cain's offering was rejected. Abel's was accepted. It insists faith isn't just about being sincere. It's about following the legal process God laid out. Transfer, then judgment.
Okay, so let's get to the judgment, the blood. Jesus has taken the sin at the Jordan. He carries it for 3 years, and then he goes to the cross.
And because he's carrying that sin, the law demands his death. The wages of sin is death. The cross was the judgment for the sins he took. It was the payment.
So when he cries out, "It is finished,"
He's not just saying, my life is over. He's saying the entire transaction that began at the Jordan is now complete. The debt is paid. It's zeroed out.
now this brings up the question that, I know every single listener is screaming this right now. What about time?
Yeah.
Jesus died 2,000 years ago. I sinned this morning. I'll probably sin again in 5 minutes. How does a transfer back then cover what I do today?
This is where we get into eternal redemption.
Yeah.
The source stresses that Jesus, as God, isn't bound by linear time. When John transferred the sin of the world, that was a singular collective thing, the sin.
So the world's sin is like one giant bucket. It has Adam's first sin and the sin I haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah, exactly. From God's perspective, the entire timeline of human sin was placed on Jesus at that one moment. There's no time paradox for God. If he took the sin of the world, he took all of it.
So to think your sin tomorrow isn't covered is...
It's to limit the power of Jesus' work. It implies he needs to come back and die again and again for every new sin.
Which leads to a really practical and frankly a scary question. If all my sin is gone, past, present, future, why not just go out and live like a maniac? Why not sin as much as I want? And why do I still feel guilty?
The classic license to sin objection. It's a valid question. The source tackles this head-on using the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet.
John 13. I found this interpretation so helpful. Jesus is washing feet, Peter objects, and Jesus says, he who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean.
That distinction is crucial. The bath versus the wash.
Okay.
The source says the bath is the salvation event, the one-time transfer of sin. If you believe in the water and the blood, you've been bathed, you're clean, you're saved, period.
But we still live in a dirty world. We still have these apple tree bodies.
Right. So as you walk through life, your feet get dirty. You commit daily sins. But washing your feet, confessing those faults, is not about getting saved again.
It's not about preventing yourself from going to hell.
No, it's about hygiene. It's about maintaining your fellowship, your relationship with Jesus.
It totally changes the motivation. You're not cleaning up your act because you're scared of being fired. You're cleaning up because you're part of the family.
Exactly. And look at the example of Peter. The source points out something I'd never really thought about. Jesus washed Peter's feet before Peter denied him.
That's a huge detail. Jesus knew Peter was about to crash and burn.
Knew he'd deny him 3 times that very night. And yet, he washed his feet and declared him clean beforehand.
So even that future terrible sin was already covered.
Already under the bath of salvation, Peter's salvation wasn't in jeopardy, his fellowship was.
This brings us to what is probably the most provocative,
Yeah.
and maybe for some, the most offensive part of this whole theology, the identity label.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
The source says that if you call yourself a sinner after you believe in Jesus, you are basically committing heresy.
It's a jarring statement. Most of us are taught to be humble, to say, I'm just a sinner saved by grace.
Right.
But Reverend Zhang argues that's a contradiction. It's actually a lack of faith.
Okay, walk me through the logic there. Why is that so bad?
Well, just follow the transaction. If Jesus took all your sin at the Jordan and he paid for it on the cross, where is the sin?
Gone, judged.
If it's gone, then you are without sin. And the legal term for someone without sin is righteous. So if you keep saying, I'm a sinner, you're essentially telling God, you missed a spot, your work wasn't enough, I still have it.
Wow. So it's not arrogance. It's not saying, look how perfect I am.
Not at all. It has nothing to do with your behavior. It's about your legal standing. It's saying, my flesh is still weak, I still make mistakes, my feet get dirty, but my record in the heavenly court has been wiped clean.
I remember reading a testimony from a woman who was just paralyzed by fear and superstition,
Yep.
constantly trying to be good enough.
Yes. And the moment she accepted that the debt was already paid, that the transfer really happened, the fear just vanished. She stopped trying to become righteous and just accepted that she was righteous because of what Jesus did.
It shifts the focus entirely off of yourself. It's not, what did I do today? But what did he do 2,000 years ago?
That is the crux of it. It moves you from a performance-based religion to a reality-based faith.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together. We started with the law being a mirror, not a ladder.
Right. It just shows us we're apple trees that can't stop producing bad apples.
And because we couldn't fix ourselves, God provided a system of transfer. In the Old Testament, it was the laying on of hands.
Which points directly to the New Testament reality, but not just the cross.
The water and the blood.
Yeah.
The baptism was the transfer, where John the Baptist, as the high priest, passed the sin of the world to Jesus.
And the cross was the judgment for that sin.
Leading to this conclusion that if you believe this complete gospel, you're not a sinner trying to be good. You're a righteous person who just has to deal with dirty feet.
Exactly. And that changes everything. It moves you from fear to gratitude.
It's a fascinating perspective. It makes the whole process feel, well, very concrete.
It does. It treats sin like a debt that has to be moved from one ledger to another. It satisfies that need for justice.
So here's the question we want to leave you with, and it's directly from the source material. When you look in the mirror, the spiritual one, what do you see?
Do you see a sinner trying their best, hoping that if you check enough boxes, it'll be enough? Or do you see a righteous person who has weak flesh, but whose criminal record has been completely wiped clean?
According to Reverend Zhang, the answer to that question determines everything. It's the difference between constant anxiety and absolute peace.
And it really challenges you to think about how you read the Bible. Is it a to-do list that condemns you, or is it a will and testament that's already been executed in your favor?
It's definitely heavy stuff, but it forces you to think. And honestly, whether you agree with it or not, adding the water to the equation does seem to solve a lot of logical gaps people struggle with.
It gives you a lot to chew on, for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.
See you then.